Hello, darling. You know I command that no one can against me and those things I normally say. Of course, darling, but it's true, you know. There is a long trip I did to come to here, of course, darling. I did go to war and things like those. And okay, what can I do against that? Just nothing, darling. I would love to be with you, but okay, darling. So it's life here that we're here killing each other, of course, darling. That is what you can have. We want peace and we want truth, but it don't appear, of course, darling. So it's life here. What can we do against that? Just nothing. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, you have my Russian money, my $100 bill. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, you know that I have that is car. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, you know I'm with Delilah. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That me, that is so blunt. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. And with me, that is the gold, of course, darling. And then I steal the silver to another guy. And so it's life, of course, darling, that we are in the system and things like those. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That people don't wanna believe in jeans, but thanks to my jeans, I steal the gold. Of course, darling, so is life. Of course, darling, I'm in the system, and you know that. So come on, of course, darling, that is what you can have here. That I love you so much. The only thing I want is to be next to you, darling. That is what you can have, of course, darling. Thank you next and things like that. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I have the money there too, of course, darling. Don't care about nothing, of course, darling. That is what you can have. You know, I want hell, of course, darling. I don't wanna be saved and nothing like that. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I want hell, that I don't wanna be saved and nothing like that. But here I can fall death because it's my money, of course, darling. So it is here. I love you so much. Of course, darling, I could talk about politics and things like that, but I have it all set in the system and I'm not gonna repeat it. Of course, darling, that is what you can have here. Of course, darling, things like those that I'm the general that I give the orders. Of course, darling, that is what you can have here. That we do publicity and things like those. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That we are the whole time giving the orders and things like those and trying that the people don't kill each other. Of course, darling, in the Cold War, that is what you can have. We were there in the Cold War, of course, darling, but now they have this silent war, and the only thing I say is that your morning is your morning, that you don't have to fall death near to a pool to reincarnate nowhere. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That you should fall death and go under earth and let the pair have his money and be happy and don't be a stone in between and things like those. That is the only thing I think about this holy war. Of course, darling, that is what you can have here. That I'm in the system, that I'm gonna fall death by your side. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That is the only thing I want. Of course, darling, you know that. Of course, darling, it's war, it's difficult. We're the whole time killing each other. There is many people here. Of course, darling, it's a big hood. Of course, darling, and it's full of problems. Of course, darling, but I'm gonna let them behind. Of course, darling, no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I'm a little bit overheated. Of course, darling, everyone is making pictures of me. Of course, darling, and I feel a little bit So, of course, darling, everybody's watching at me, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable and things like those. Of course, darling, that is what you can say, but okay, what can you do against that? Just nothing, just try to be in your bubble and be fine, and be well and be happy. Of course, darling, that is what you can have here, that is the only thing I want. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, that the states don't have debts and that they don't kill each other and things like those in the Cold War. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, that in the Cold War the only thing I want is that the people don't have debts, that the state don't have debts, because if the state have debts, the people don't have money and no decision-making capacity, and they fall, and we're gonna be slaves because no one is gonna represent us. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That's why I don't want that the states have debts and things like those. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, and that they don't kill each other, and that they play some Catan and things like those. Of course, darling, you know that that is the only thing I want. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, that is what you can have here. That is the only thing I want in the Cold War and in the Holy War. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I want that everyone stays with his money, that the people can be happy, of course, that they can take care of his life and don't take care of some stone in between. Of course, darling, and if they have some bone to eat, that they have a whole asylum, that they eat the whole barbecue, and that's all, of course, darling, because it's not fine to eat only a bone. Of course, darling, take the whole barbecue and let it okay. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, because if not, you're carrying a dead guy as a kid your whole life, and your kid is a copy of a dead guy and things like those. Of course, darling, and that's what we're preaching here. Of course, darling, and we have a cabaret and we talk about politics, of course, and the women dance. And so it is here, darling, that is what we do, and we are the whole day dancing the night away. Of course, darling, dancing the night out. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, that is the only thing we want. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, that we are in the system. Of course, darling, that is what you want. Of course, darling, that is what you can have, that I don't know if I'm gonna survive, but okay, darling, so is life, and I wanna fall dead by your side. Of course, darling, thanks for coming, that is what you can have. I love you so much, of course, darling.